Good morning. My colleague has already described the aspects, be they technical or not, um, of the technicalities, in the words, of bioprotection. Now, to bring it to practical terms, bioprotection is a natural action whose purpose is to maintain, preserve, or prevent, as much as possible the deterioration of a product, in this case, the spoilage of a wine. We've used bioprotection to different extents, always using selected yeasts. In the past, we've used the pied de cuve and also have found ways to direct the preservation of a wine. The principle behind bioprotection is competition. If I place a selected yeast in a fluid, if I add it to a fluid, I will know that the development of this population will in itself prevent the formation of microorganisms that are unwanted. And this is a practical example of what I'm saying. The same must. It's the same must. On the right-hand side, there was an inoculation with lactobacillus, while on the left-hand side, it was left as it was. So on the left-hand side, you see the appearance of molds and fungi, while on the right-hand side, it is well protected. So what does bioprotection do? Let's see the practical effects. There's a lower amount of SO2 that needs to be used, and so the whenever lactobacilli are used, it means that there's an attempt to reduce SO2 content, and also you have lower amounts of biogenic amines, so healthier wines. And as it's been mentioned, the biogenic amines will not develop because there's no development of their precursors. Also, the wines are more limpid, containing no putrescine, no cadaverin. And through bioprotection and the different association of different organisms that work in a synergistic and simultaneous way, you can also keep the alcohol content lower. Several tests have been run where Lactobacillus plantaris associated with other organisms were used to reduce the alcohol content by 1%. Then a lower amount of toxins through the addition of lactobacilli. You can avoid the embedding of molds and fungi, thus leading, for instance, to the reduction of ochratoxin. Lower amounts of nitrous amines. When you have biogenic amines and nitrogen, there's a risk that nitrous amines develop that are cancer precursors. And then we have a higher amount of aromas, which is most relevant to the winemaker. So the microorganisms that we have will generate the relevant esters that will make the aromatic profile of a wine more interesting. And there's also a lower interference of contaminants because of the competition with the microorganisms that can create flavors that make a wine unpleasant, and also the wines will have more appreciated flavors and aromas, especially the fruity ones. Let's see on this chart how the use of lactobacillus can help us, for instance, when we need to improve or maintain alcoholic fermentation. This is an example in La Mancha, This was in a year when initially we had a problem with diseases that had an impact on the harvest. In this case, we've had to inoculate multiple times because fermentation could not be completed if allowed to proceed by itself. You see that the pH is 3.6, the SO2 is all in all normal. But you see the difference compared to the control. The impact of Botrytis cinerea and the appearance of Aspergillus niger is clearly lower. So in the end, you see that these are wines that complete fermentation more easily and also have a better organoleptic and sensory quality. We've talked about the generation of aromas, and that's important when you use a non-Saccharomyces yeast from the very beginning of the process. And it's interesting to see what you can obtain from an aromatic perspective. Top left, you see that because of the activity of Pichia, you can generate a higher amount of thiols compared to your control. And then thinking of other compounds such as ethyl octanoate or ethyl butyrate, there's on average a higher amount of esters in these cases compared to the controls in treated samples compared to controls. In this chart, we've tried to differentiate the various non-Saccharomyces strains. Fruzen is our Pichia strain, and then Prelude, which is Prospera and Concert, and then Melody, which is a mixture of Saccharomyces and non-Saccharomyces. As you can tell, the sensory characteristics that the chart is showing give us useful information. For instance, it would appear that Concerto gives us more acidity, higher acidity, and fruity sensations. It is less bitter, and this comes from the fact that Cancia thermotolerance has an ability to metabolize sugar, generating lactic acid. So this gives us a freshness in the wine. Prelude, which is our Tauronospora strain, shows clearly that in this case it improves the smoothness and body, while the acidity is completely different, and that is ascribable to the role of manoproteins during the lysis. And then Fruzen, our Pichia strain, in this case is having an impact on both acidity and the floral characters because of the activity of pectins and beta aliases. This test was run using the Bobel variety in the area of Mancha, Spain. In these two web charts, or spider charts, you can clearly see that bioprotection can have a decisive influence onto the sensory characteristics of the wine. In blue, you see a wine that was produced with an inoculation followed by a second inoculation of Saccharomyces and non-Saccharomyces. In this case, the aromatic profile is clearly superior compared to the control sample for both fruit or strawberries. In this case, it's the Tempranillo. In this other spider chart, this was a test that we carried out on Tempranillo, working at the same time with the lactobacillus at high doses, followed by Cancer thermotolerance also at high doses, and that was compared against the Cerevisiae. What we see is that in the case of the Cancer, there's more roundness in the wine as well as smoothness. So essentially, this wine has sensory characteristics that are clearly higher compared to the control sample. In this specific case, we took grapes that had a potential alcohol level of 14%, and the wine produced ended up at 13.2% by volume. So we reduced the total alcohol. This is a summary of what bioprotection does. Bioprotection in the course of the process yields healthier wines, and that corresponds to a tendency on the market, be it today or in the future. So healthier wines with the lower contents in terms of biogenic amines. I'm a consultant to many wineries, and every time that's a requirement. A wine with fewer biogenic amines. There are countries that already have thresholds, regulatory thresholds on biogenic amines. But also a requirement is to reduce the sulfites. In recent years, it's been understood that SO2 has been overused, and now people are looking for methodologies that would allow, make it possible to use less of it, but also ochratoxins and nitrosamines need to be reduced. We want more current wines that need to be round and smooth, and wines that are easier to preserve. So that is also in line with environmentally friendly concepts. So these wines need to be cleaner and elegant and easier to store. Thank you very much for listening so attentively. I'll take your